The Duke's Secret Promise. Chapter 1. A Modest Proposal. The rain fell in relentless sheets over Thornbridge House, each drop a cold echo against the soot-stained windows of London's most formidable ducal residence. The April wind howled through Grosvenor Square, rattling the iron lanterns and sending footmen scurrying for shelter. To Miss Eliza Harrow, standing in the vast marble foyer, with water dripping from the hem of her faded pelisse and pooling around her cracked half-boots, the mansion felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum, a monument to a man who had buried himself alive. "This way, miss." The butler was a skeletal figure named Penworth, his black coat immaculate, his face expressionless. He had not offered to take her damp gloves. He had not offered her a handkerchief for the water streaming from her bonnet. He simply turned and walked, expecting her to follow. Eliza gathered her courage. It was a small, tattered thing after months of watching her father sink deeper into debt and her sisters grow thinner, and followed. Her footsteps echoed on the black and white checkered floor. Above her, a chandelier the size of a small cottage glittered with 1,000 crystals, each one worth more than her family's entire annual income. The irony was not lost on her. She was here to sell herself for a roof over her sisters' heads, and the man who would buy her had more candles in one room than her father had shillings to his name. The advertisement had appeared in the Times 3 weeks ago, nestled between notices of estates for let and announcements of shipping arrivals. Eliza had read it so many times she had committed it to memory. Wanted, a wife of unquestionable respectability and modest disposition, marriage of convenience, no affection required, generous settlement provided, inquiries to Thornbridge House, Grosvenor Square. Her father, the Reverend Harold Harrow, had wept when she showed him. "My dearest girl, you cannot mean to—" "I can, Papa, and I will." She had held his gnarled hands, those hands that had once held a congregation spellbound, but now trembled with the palsy of age and worry. "Charlotte is 12. Mary is only 10. If we do not pay Mr. Grimsby by Michaelmas, he will put us out. We will have nowhere to go. This is not a sacrifice. It is a solution." "A marriage without love is a prison," her father had whispered. "Mamma loved you," Eliza had replied gently, "and she still died of a fever when I was 8. Love is no guarantee of happiness, Papa. But money guarantees food and firewood and a future for the girls. I will take a prison with a full larder over a cottage with an empty one." Now, watching the butler's straight back as he led her through corridors lined with paintings of grim-faced ancestors, Eliza wondered if she had been too hasty. The house was cold, not merely in temperature, but in spirit. No flowers graced the tables. No fire burned in the hallway hearths. The servants moved like shadows, their faces blank, their voices hushed. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. Penworth stopped before a pair of massive oak doors. "His Grace will see you now. You have been allotted 15 minutes. 15 minutes to decide the rest of my life," Eliza murmured. "If you wish to withdraw, miss, no one would think less of you." The butler's voice was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. A warning, perhaps, or a plea. Eliza straightened her spine. She was not tall, barely 5 feet in her stockings, but she had learned long ago that height had nothing to do with strength. "Thank you, Penworth. I do not wish to withdraw. Announce me." The doors swung open. Chapter 2. The Duke in Shadow. The study was a cavern of dark wood and darker memories. Bookshelves lined every wall, their volumes bound in leather the colour of bruises. A fire crackled in the enormous hearth, yet it seemed to cast more shadows than light, the flames struggling against the oppressive gloom. The curtains were drawn, though it was only 3 in the afternoon. Behind a desk large enough to land a small ship stood the man himself. Duke Alexander Thornbridge was not what she expected. She had braced herself for a gout-ridden lecher in his 60s, perhaps with a wig and a wheeze, or a withered eccentric with yellowed nails and a fondness for cruel jests. Instead, she found a man perhaps 30 years of age, with shoulders as broad as a blacksmith's, and a face that might have been carved by a melancholic sculptor, sharp cheekbones, a firm jaw, and eyes the colour of a winter sea, grey and distant, and impossibly cold. His hair was the deep brown of freshly turned earth, and he wore impeccable black coat, black waistcoat, black cravat. Even his signet ring was onyx. But it was his eyes that held her. They were not cold, precisely. They were absent, as if the man behind them had retreated to a distant tower and had forgotten the way back, leaving only a shell to conduct business and sign documents. A ghost walking among the living. "Miss Harrow," he said. His voice was low, a cello string drawn too tight. It had the quality of a man who spoke rarely and chose his words with the care of a surgeon selecting a scalpel. "You are younger than I anticipated." "You are handsomer than I anticipated, Your Grace," she replied before she could stop herself. "Shall we consider our disappointments evenly matched?" The words hung in the air. Eliza felt heat flood her cheeks. She had not meant to be impertinent. But something about the Duke's studied indifference provoked her, like a child poking at a sleeping bear just to see if it would wake. A flicker. Something moved in those winter eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or a wince of long dormant humour. The corner of his mouth twitched, once, twice. Then the mask returned, thicker than before. "You have read the terms," he said, gesturing to a chair she dared not sit in yet. "A platonic union, separate chambers, no expectations of—" He paused, searching for the word. "Connubial affection. You will have the Thornbridge townhouse fully staffed, a country estate in Somerset, an allowance of £5,000 per annum, and complete autonomy over the household. In return, you will bear my name, manage my social obligations with discretion, perform the duties of hostess when required, and ask no questions about my past. £5,000. Eliza's mind reeled. Her father's entire living as vicar of St. Stephen's was £300 a year. She could buy a new bonnet every week and still have enough left to endow a school for orphaned girls. But the last condition snagged at her like a thorn. "Ask no questions about my past." "No questions," she repeated slowly. "That seems a rather frail foundation for a marriage, even a convenient one. Forgive me, Your Grace, but I was raised to believe that marriage, even one of transaction, should be built on honesty. Secrets have a way of poisoning wells." Alexander turned to the window. His back was a wall of black wool, his posture rigid. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault. "Foundations are overrated, Miss Harrow. I require a duchess in name only. You require funds to save your family from ruin. This is a transaction. Transactions are clean. Emotions are not. They rot. They decay. They turn to poison in the blood." She studied the rigid line of his shoulders, the way his hands, large, capable hands, gripped the windowsill until his knuckles went white. A man who had been burned, she realized. Burned so deeply and so thoroughly that he had built a fortress of solitude around his heart and called it peace. A strange tenderness pricked at her, unwelcome and unasked for. This was not a monster. This was a man in hiding. "May I ask one question, Your Grace? Not about your past, about the future." He turned, and for a heartbeat she saw it. A raw, flayed vulnerability beneath the ducal mask. Then it was gone. "You may ask. I may not answer." "If I accept this arrangement, if I become your duchess, will you treat me with kindness? Not love. I am not so foolish as to ask for that. But kindness, civility, the basic respect one human being owes another." The silence stretched. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house a clock struck the quarter hour. "I will never raise a hand to you," he said finally. "I will never speak to you with intentional cruelty. I will ensure you want for nothing material. Is that kindness enough?" Eliza considered. It was not enough. She suspected she deserved more. But Charlotte and Mary deserved a warm room and full bellies more. "It will do," she said. "I accept your terms, Your Grace. I will marry you." He nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "The wedding is Saturday. I have already obtained a special license. Penworth will show you to your rooms. You will remain here as my guest until the ceremony. My solicitor will provide the marriage settlement papers for your signature this evening. And my family? They may attend the wedding. I will pay for their travel and lodging. He paused, something softening in his expression for just a moment. I was not always this man, Miss Harrow. I want you to know that. I was different once. What happened? The mask slammed back into place. That is a question about my past. Good afternoon, Miss Harrow. As she followed Penworth up the sweeping staircase, her footsteps now dry, her heart now heavy, Eliza glanced back. The Duke had returned to his window, staring out at the rain. In the fading light, he looked less like a nobleman and more like a prisoner. She had secured her family's future. But she had also walked into a house that held its breath, waiting for a secret to break. Chapter 3. The Portrait with Empty Eyes. The first week of their marriage was a study in polite silence. The wedding had been a small, grim affair, a chapel in Mayfair, a ring that felt heavy as a shackle on her finger, a kiss on the cheek so cold it might have been administered by a statue. Alexander had worn the same impeccable black, and his eyes had remained fixed on a point somewhere above her left shoulder, as if he could not bear to look directly at her. Her father had wept. Her sisters had worn borrowed dresses and confused smiles. And Eliza had become the Duchess of Thornbridge without ever feeling like a bride. Now, 7 days later, she had learned the rhythm of the house. Alexander took his morning coffee in his study, his noon meal at his club, and his evenings in the library with a brandy and a book he never turned the page on. He did not join her for breakfast. He did not escort her to dinner. He left notes for her on the hall table. Out till midnight. Do not wait up, as if she were a housekeeper rather than a wife. Eliza, left to her own devices, explored. Thornbridge House was vast, a labyrinth of corridors and forgotten rooms. On Monday, she discovered a ballroom that had not been used in a decade, its chandeliers shrouded in dust cloths. On Tuesday, she found a conservatory where the glass ceiling had cracked and ivy had crept in through the gaps, turning the space into a wild, beautiful jungle. On Wednesday, she located the kitchens where the cook, a formidable woman named Mrs. Hatch, took one look at Eliza's pinched face and pressed a hot scone into her hand. "You're too thin, Your Grace," Mrs. Hatch said gruffly. "We'll put some meat on those bones." "My husband does not dine at home," Eliza said. "I had thought to take my meals in my room." "His Grace is a fool." Mrs. Hatch snapped her apron. "No offence, Your Grace." "None taken. I suspect you are correct." But it was on Thursday that the true discovery came. She had been searching for the library. She had finished the 3 novels she brought from home and was growing desperate for entertainment when a maid dropped a curtsy so low she nearly toppled. "Forgive me, Your Grace," the girl cried, her face as pale as milk. "I did not mean to. The door was open, and I only—" Eliza's gaze slipped past the maid, into a room frozen in amber. The door stood ajar, and beyond it was a chamber that time had forgotten. Dust motes danced in the slanted light from a single uncovered window. A dressing table held a silver hairbrush, tarnished with age, a porcelain hand mirror, and a dried rose in a crystal vase. A gown of emerald silk hung from a wardrobe door, as if waiting for its owner to return from a stroll. And on the wall, above a cold fireplace, hung a portrait. A woman. Young, beautiful, with chestnut curls and laughing blue eyes. She wore the emerald gown, and a small diamond pendant glittered at her throat. Her smile was wide and genuine, the smile of a woman who had never known a moment's sorrow, but it was the man beside her that made Eliza's breath catch. A younger Alexander, perhaps 22 or 23, his face unlined, his hair unfashionably long, his hand resting on the woman's shoulder with easy intimacy. He was smiling, not the thin, polite smile he offered to servants and solicitors, but a real smile, wide and warm and full of light. His eyes in the portrait were not winter grey, but summer blue. He looked, Eliza realized, happy. Who is she? Eliza whispered. The maid's face went paler still. No one, Your Grace, no one at all. Please, you must not ask. You must not come in here. His Grace forbids. She stopped, clamping a hand over her mouth. Forbids what? But the maid only shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes, and fled down the corridor. That night, Eliza could not sleep. She lay in her vast bed, her separate bed, in her separate chamber at the opposite end of the hall from Alexander's rooms, and stared at the canopy above her head. The curtains were damask, the sheets were Italian linen, and the pillows were stuffed with goose down. By any material measure, she was comfortable, but her mind would not rest. No one, Your Grace. No one at all. A woman did not hang in a locked room in a duke's house unless she was someone. A woman did not leave behind an emerald gown and a dried rose unless she was mourned. And a man did not lose his smile unless he had lost something precious. Eliza threw back the covers and padded into the hall. Her bare feet made no sound on the runner. The house was dark, save for the occasional wall sconce left burning for servants. She had no destination in mind, but her feet carried her toward the library. A sliver of light escaped beneath the door. She knocked, softly. Your Grace? Silence. Then, enter. The library was smaller than the study, cosier. A fire burned low in the grate, and the shelves were packed with well-worn volumes, not the leather-bound showpieces of the study, but books that had been read and loved. A Shakespeare with cracked spine, a Byron with dog-eared pages, a volume of sonnets with a faded ribbon marking a place. Alexander sat in a leather wing-back chair, his cravat undone, his waistcoat unbuttoned, a half-empty decanter of brandy at his elbow. He was not reading. He was staring at the fire, and his face was no longer a mask. It was a battlefield, grief and rage, and something softer warring in the flickering light. Lines she had not noticed before carved deep grooves around his mouth. His hair was dishevelled, as if he had been running his hands through it. You should not be here, he said, not looking at her. His voice was thick, slurred, just slightly, with brandy. Neither should you. She settled into the chair opposite him without waiting for an invitation. Brandy at 2 a.m. is the drink of men who are running from something, or mourning something. Which is it? He laughed then, a short, bitter sound like glass breaking. You are perceptive, Duchess. That will make this arrangement either much easier or much harder. I have not yet decided which. Eliza, she said. My name is Eliza. I would like to hear you say it. He looked at her then, really looked. His grey eyes travelled over her face, her too pale skin, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her simple nightgown, and something shifted in his expression. Not desire. Something softer, something sadder. Eliza, he repeated. The name sounded different in his low voice, like a prayer or a lament. You should go back to bed. I saw the portrait, she said quietly. The east wing, the locked room. She was beautiful. The silence stretched like a rope bridge over a chasm. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The fire spat and hissed. Cordelia, he said at last, my first wife, married at 21. I was a fool for her. He poured another measure of brandy, his hand steady despite the drink. She died. That is all you need to know. Died how? I said that is all. Eliza rose from her chair. She crossed the space between them and, before her courage failed, she knelt at his feet and took his hand. It was cold. His fingers trembled, just slightly beneath her touch. I am not your enemy, she said, her voice low and fierce. I am your wife, even a convenient one, and I see a man drowning in a sorrow he refuses to name. You made me promise to ask no questions about your past, but I made no promise to stop caring. I made no promise to pretend that you are not in pain, and I cannot, sit in my pretty rooms and spend my allowance while you destroy yourself by inches. He stared at their joined hands. His chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Caring is a weapon, Eliza. It cuts the wielder deepest. I learned that lesson. I paid for it in blood. Whose blood? He pulled his hand away, gently, but firmly. Go to bed. Please. I am asking you as your husband to leave me to my brandy and my ghosts. She stood. She wanted to argue. She wanted to shake him, to force him to see that he was not the only one who had known loss and disappointment. But she saw something in his eyes, a pleading, a desperate need to be alone with his torment, and she respected it. Good night, Alexander, she said. As she climbed the stairs, she heard something behind her, a sound so soft she almost missed it. The Duke of Thornbridge, the man who had vowed never to love again, was weeping. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Country. The invitation to Thornbridge Manor came as a surprise. We will leave for Somerset on Monday, Alexander informed her over the breakfast table, the first time he had joined her for a meal. His voice was neutral, his cravat impeccable. If he remembered the night he had wept in the library, he gave no sign of it. The London season is beginning, and I have no desire to participate. You may remain here if you prefer the city. I would prefer to go with you, Eliza said, spreading marmalade on her toast. I have never seen the country estate, and I confess I'm curious about the place where you grew up. Something flickered across his face. You will not find answers there. Only more questions. Then I shall have to content myself with the scenery. The journey to Somerset took 2 days. They travelled in Alexander's lavish carriage, velvet seats, a silver lamp, a basket of provisions that could have fed a village, and spoke barely a dozen words to each other. Eliza read. Alexander stared out the window. The landscape changed from the smoky grey of London to the lush green of the countryside, and by the time they turned into the long drive of Thornbridge Manor, Eliza had fallen half in love with England. The manor was everything the townhouse was not. Where Grosvenor Square was cold and formal, the manor was warm and grand. Grey stone walls draped in ivy, mullioned windows that caught the afternoon sun, a sweeping lawn that led down to a river. Wisteria climbed the portico. A flock of sheep grazed in the distance. It looked, Eliza thought, like a place where happiness might be possible. But as they stepped down from the carriage, she noticed the servants. They were older than the London staff, their faces lined with years of service, and something else. Fear. They glanced at each other when Alexander passed, their eyes darting, their hands trembling. The housekeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Peck, curtsied so deeply her knees cracked. Welcome home, Your Grace, she said, but her voice wavered. Alexander acknowledged her with a nod and strode inside, leaving Eliza to follow. The first 3 days in Somerset were no different from London. Alexander retreated to his study or walked the moors alone, returning with mud on his boots and a deeper shadow in his eyes. Eliza explored the manor, a kinder, brighter house than the townhouse, with flowers in the vases and fires in every hearth, but she could not shake the feeling of being watched. The servants spoke to her only in monosyllables. Doors closed when she approached. Conversations died in hallways. On the 4th day, she found Mrs. Peck in the still room, sorting dried lavender. May I help? Eliza asked. Mrs. Peck startled like a rabbit caught in a snare. Your Grace, I did not hear you come in. I am light on my feet. Eliza sat on a stool and began to sort the lavender by hand. Tell me about Cordelia. The housekeeper went white. I cannot, Your Grace. Please, do not ask me. Everyone tells me not to ask, but no one tells me why. Was she cruel? Was she mad? Did she harm someone? Mrs. Peck's hands shook, the lavender spilled from her lap. She was neither cruel nor mad, Your Grace. She was unhappy, and unhappiness, left to fester, becomes poison. Poison for whom? For everyone who loved her, for His Grace most of all. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. They say she threw herself from the cliffs, or that he pushed her. No one knows. The inquest ruled it an accident. But the magistrate, he was a friend of the old Duke. And the letters, oh, I've said too much. What letters? But Mrs. Peck had already fled, her apron pressed to her face, her sobs echoing down the corridor. Chapter 5. The Letters. That night, Eliza did something reckless. She waited until the house was dark and silent, until the last servant had retired and the clocks had struck midnight. Then she crept down the corridor to Alexander's study. The door was locked, but she had noticed something earlier. The third drawer of his desk had a faulty mechanism. Penworth had struggled with it that morning, muttering about a spring that needed replacing, a hairpin, a prayer, a soft click. The drawer slid open. Inside, a leather-bound journal, its cover worn, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded black ribbon. Eliza's hands trembled as she lifted them. The paper was old, the ink faded. She carried them to the window, where the moonlight was brightest, and untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated 5 years ago. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, but the words were anything but. My dearest Cordelia, the Duke suspects nothing. He is so blind in his devotion that he believes every word you whisper. Meet me at the Folly on Thursday. Bring the diamond pendant. I have found a fence in Bristol who will pay handsomely. Do not fail me, my love. You know what I hold over you. Yours in shadow, J. Eliza's blood turned to ice. She read another. And another. The letters spilled their secrets like a wound bleeding out. Cordelia had not loved Alexander. She had married him for his title and his fortune, but her heart and her bed belonged to another. A man named Julian Blackwood, a charming fortune hunter with debts of his own. Together, they had plotted to fleece the Duke, sell the family heirlooms, forge documents to secure a massive loan against the Thornbridge estates, and then flee to the continent, leaving Alexander ruined and humiliated. But the letters revealed something else, too. Cordelia had been afraid. Her later letters pleaded with Julian to call off the scheme. He is not the monster we believed. He is gentle. He is kind. He looks at me as if I am the sun. I cannot do this to him. Please, Julian, let us find another way. Julian's replies grew uglier. You will do as you are told, or I will tell him everything. I will tell him about the nights in the Folly. I will tell him about the money you have already stolen. You will ruin him, Cordelia, or I will ruin you. The final letter was different. It was not from Julian. It was from Cordelia to Alexander, never sent, still folded in its envelope. My dearest Alexander, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I have done terrible things. I have betrayed you in ways I cannot begin to confess. But I want you to know that somewhere along the way, somewhere between your first smile and your last kiss, I fell in love with you. Truly, deeply, desperately. I am not worthy of you. I never was. But I am going to make it right. I am going to meet Julian tonight, and I am going to end this. I will give him nothing. I will tell him that I would rather die than hurt you. Forgive me. C. Eliza's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the page. The date on the letter was the night Cordelia died. A floorboard creaked behind her. I asked you not to pry. She spun. Alexander stood in the doorway, his dressing gown loose, his hair dishevelled. He had been awake. He had been watching. And his face was a mask of barely contained anguish. You asked me not to ask questions, Eliza said, clutching the letters to her chest. You did not ask me to remain willfully blind. She was going to ruin you, Alexander. She and this Julian Blackwood. But she changed her mind. At the end, she changed her mind. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and snatched the letters from her hands. You do not understand. Then explain it to me. Please. I am your wife. Let me share this burden. I loved her. The words tore from him, raw and bleeding. I loved her with every foolish, romantic bone in my body. I gave her everything, my name, my fortune, my heart. And she laughed at me. She plotted against me. She lay in another man's arms while I slept alone in our bed. He was shaking. Eliza had never seen a man so tall look so small. But the worst part, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, is that I still loved her at the end. When I found her at the bottom of those cliffs, broken, bleeding, dying, I held her in my arms, and I still loved her. Her last word was not my name. It was Julian, and I have hated myself for failing her ever since. You did not fail her, Eliza said fiercely. She failed you, and then she tried to make it right. Read her last letter again, Alexander. Read it. She loved you. At the very end, she loved you. He stared at the letter in his hands. His jaw worked. His eyes glistened. I made a promise on her grave, he said. I swore I would find Julian Blackwood and make him pay for what he did. But he disappeared. And every day that passes, I break that promise anew. Eliza took a step toward him, then another. She reached up, she was so much shorter than him, and placed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. It pounded beneath her hand like a trapped bird. You made a promise to a ghost, she said, but you also made a vow to me, in a church, in front of God. You promised to protect and cherish. You have done neither. You have hidden. You have run. And you have let a dead woman and a living villain steal the man you might have been. His breath caught. Eliza. I am not Cordelia. I will never betray you. I will never lie to you. But I will also not stand by while you drown. So here is my promise to you, Alexander Thornbridge. I will help you find Julian Blackwood. I will help you clear Cordelia's name, and I will help you learn to live again, whether you want me to or not. For a long moment he did not move. Then slowly his hand came up to cover hers. His fingers were cold, but they held her tight. You are the most infuriating woman I have ever met. I know. You are also the bravest. I know that too. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and in that laugh, Eliza heard something she had not heard before. Hope. Chapter 6. The Serpent Returns. The first note arrived 3 days later. It was nailed to the door of the Manor's chapel, a small, ancient building in the woods where the Thornbridge family had worshipped for centuries. The vicar found it when he came to prepare for Sunday service. He brought it straight to Alexander, his hands shaking, his face pale. The note was written on expensive paper in a slashing hand. Dear Alexander, I see you have found yourself a new bride. How charming. The Duchess is prettier than the last one, though perhaps not as trusting. I hope for your sake she is more loyal. I also note that the diamond pendant Cordelia gave me has been missing from my collection for some time. I wonder if you might be persuaded to buy it back. A sentimental item, you understand. Say, £20,000. I will send instructions for the exchange. Do not involve the authorities. You know what I have. You know what I can reveal. Your old friend J.D. Alexander read the note 3 times. Then he read it aloud to Eliza, who had come running when she heard the commotion. £20,000, she said. That is a fortune. It is everything I have in ready funds, and it would only be the beginning. Julian will bleed me dry year after year until nothing is left. Alexander crumpled the note in his fist. But I will not pay him a single penny. What will you do instead? Alexander turned to the window. Outside, the Somerset Hills rolled green and gold in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, Julian Blackwood was watching, waiting, smiling. We will set a trap, Alexander said, but we will need help, and we will need to trust each other completely. Can you do that, Eliza? Can you trust a man who has already failed one wife? Eliza crossed the room and took his arm. She did not speak. She simply stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, facing the window, and whatever lurked beyond it. That, she said finally, is not a question that deserves an answer. It is a choice that deserves action. And I have already made my choice, Alexander. I chose you the moment I said, I do. I am not going to unchoose you now. He turned to look at her. The winter in his eyes had thawed. In its place was something warm, terrifying, and entirely unexpected. Eliza, he said, I think I might. Do not say it yet, she interrupted softly. First, let us catch your serpent. Then we can decide what we are to each other. But I will tell you this. I did not marry you for your money. I married you because I saw a man worth saving, and you, Alexander Thornbridge, were never broken. You were merely waiting for someone to remind you of your own worth. He gathered her close. The fire burned low. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, and somewhere in the shadows, Julian Blackwood sharpened his knives. Chapter 7. The Trap is Set. The plan was reckless, dangerous, and entirely Eliza's. She wrote to Julian Blackwood herself, using a false name and a forwarding address in Bath. She claimed to be a former maid at Thornbridge Manor who had stolen letters from the Duke's study, letters that implicated Julian in Cordelia's death. If he wanted them back, he would meet her at the abandoned folly on the cliffs at midnight, alone, with the diamond pendant as proof of his identity. You cannot do this, Alexander said for the 10th time. They stood in the library, the letter in his hand, his face taut with worry. He is dangerous, Eliza. He killed Cordelia. Whether by accident or design, he killed her. I will not let you risk yourself. He will not come if you are there. He knows you too well. But he does not know me. To him, I am just a greedy servant looking for a payout. Eliza took the letter from him and folded it neatly. I am not afraid of Julian Blackwood. I am afraid of what will happen if we do nothing. He will blackmail you for the rest of your life. He will never stop, and I refuse to spend my marriage looking over my shoulder. Alexander's jaw tightened. Then I will be nearby, hidden, if he so much as touches you. You will be 10 paces behind me the entire time. I have already arranged it with Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald Vaughan was the local magistrate, a man with a reputation for integrity and a personal hatred of blackmailers. Alexander had consulted him in secret, sharing the letters and the locket Eliza had discovered hidden beneath a floorboard in the east wing, containing a miniature portrait of Captain Thomas Hartley, Cordelia's true love. Sir Reginald will bring constables, Alexander said, unconvinced. But if Julian realizes it is a trap, he may flee before they can act. Then we must ensure he does not realize. We must make him believe I am real, a frightened maid with stolen goods and a price. Eliza tucked the letter into her reticule. I have played many roles in my life, Alexander. The dutiful daughter, the desperate spinster, the convenient duchess. One more performance will not break me. He caught her hand. It might break me. If anything happened to you, nothing will happen to me, because you will be there. You promised to protect me, remember? On our wedding day. I hold you to that promise now. For a long moment he stared at her. Then, slowly, he raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. It was the first time he had touched her with anything resembling tenderness. You are extraordinary, Eliza Thornbridge. I hope you know that. I am beginning to, she said softly. Chapter 8. Midnight on the Cliffs. The cliffs of Somerset were a jagged teeth against a moonless sky. The wind howled like a wounded animal, tearing at Eliza's cloak and whipping her hair across her face. Below, the sea churned white with fury, crashing against the rocks with a sound like thunder. The abandoned folly, a crumbling stone gazebo built by some romantic ancestor, loomed before her, its empty windows like eye sockets in a skull. Eliza stood at the entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched a leather pouch containing not the real letters, but blank paper, fake evidence designed to buy her time. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The cold seeped through her boots. 10 paces behind me. She had insisted Alexander stay hidden in the trees, but now, alone in the dark, she wondered if she had been foolish. Julian Blackwood was a killer, and she was just a vicar's daughter playing at heroism. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel. Julian Blackwood emerged from the mist. He was handsome in a ruined way, blonde hair streaked with grey, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, a smile that did not reach his cold blue eyes. He wore a gentleman's riding coat, but highwayman's boots, and his hands were gloved in black leather. In one hand, he carried a small velvet pouch, the diamond pendant, presumably. "You are not a maid," he said, stopping 10 feet away. His voice was smooth, educated, utterly without warmth. "Your accent is too refined. Your posture is too proud. Who are you?" "I am the Duchess of Thornbridge," Eliza said. Her voice did not tremble. She was proud of that. "And you are a murderer." Julian laughed. It was a chilling sound, like ice cracking. "Cordelia fell. Everyone knows that. The inquest was quite clear." "She was pushed. By you. And I have the letters to prove it." His smile vanished. The cold eyes narrowed. "Give them to me." "No." He moved then, fast, faster than she could have imagined. He lunged for her, and his gloved hand closed around her wrist. She gasped, tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Where are the letters?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Tell me, or I will throw you off these cliffs just like I threw Cordelia. And this time, there will be no inquest, only an accident, a tragic second tragedy for the poor Duke." "Let her go." The voice came from behind Julian, low, deadly. Alexander emerged from the shadows, his face a mask of cold fury. He held a pistol aimed directly at Julian's heart. "Alexander," Julian said, and he had the audacity to smile. "I was wondering when you would show yourself. Always the hero, aren't you? Always rushing in to save the damsel. How did that work out last time?" "Let her go, Julian. This is between you and me." "I think not." Julian pulled Eliza against him, using her as a shield. His arm tightened around her throat. "You will put down the pistol, or I will break her neck. Do you understand? I have nothing left to lose. You, on the other hand, you have a new wife, a pretty one. It would be a shame to lose her so soon." Alexander's hand shook. The pistol wavered. Eliza could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperate mathematics of a man trying to save her without killing her. "Alexander," she said, her voice steady despite the arm at her throat. "Remember what I told you. I am not afraid." "Shut up," Julian snarled. "No." She turned her head as much as she could and looked directly into Julian's cold eyes. "You are a coward, Julian Blackwood. You have always been a coward. You used Cordelia for money. You used Alexander for protection. And when Cordelia tried to break free, you murdered her. But you are not going to murder me, because I am not alone." "What?" She stomped on his instep with all her strength. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough. She dropped to the ground and rolled, and Alexander fired. The shot echoed across the cliffs. Julian screamed, clutching his shoulder, the velvet pouch flying from his hand. He stumbled backward, toward the edge, toward the churning sea. But before he could fall, before he could escape, lanterns flared, boots pounded. Sir Reginald and 4 constables surged from the trees, surrounding the wounded man. "Julian Blackwood," the magistrate intoned, his voice ringing across the cliffs. "You are charged with the murder of Cordelia Thornbridge, with attempted blackmail of the Duke of Thornbridge, and with the assault of the Duchess. You will come with us." Julian, bleeding, snarling, was dragged to his feet. He spat at Alexander. "This is not over. I will rot in Newgate before I let you have peace." "Then rot," Alexander said quietly. "It is more than you deserve." As the constables hauled Julian away, Alexander dropped the pistol and fell to his knees beside Eliza. His hands were shaking as he cupped her face, tilting it to the light, searching for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "Eliza, answer me." "I am fine." She was crying, she realized. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of triumph, of something deeper and stranger. "I am perfectly fine, Alexander. Thanks to you." "Thanks to you." He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. His heart pounded beneath her ear. You were extraordinary. You were magnificent. I have never been so terrified in my entire life. Nor I, she admitted. But we did it. We caught him. The truth will come out now. Your name will be cleared. I do not care about my name. He pulled back, his eyes searching hers. The winter was gone. The grey had melted into something warm and deep and terrifyingly vulnerable. I care about you. Only you, Eliza, Do not say it yet, she whispered, pressing her fingers to his lips. Say it when we are home. Say it by the fire, with no villains and no cliffs and no ghosts between us. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then, softly, her lips. Then let us go home, he said. Epilogue. A promise renewed. 6 months later, Thornbridge Manor bloomed with the first roses of summer. The scandal had broken, but not as Alexander had feared. When the trial of Julian Blackwood concluded with a conviction for manslaughter and blackmail, Julian's own journal, recovered from his hiding place in Bristol, had provided the final proof. The London Times printed a full retraction of its earlier innuendos. The Duke of Thornbridge, once whispered to be a murderer, was hailed as a man of quiet honour who had protected his wife's memory at the cost of his own reputation. Captain Thomas Hartley, Cordelia's true love, came forward to testify. He had been waiting on the ship in the Channel the night Cordelia died. He had seen Julian flee the cliffs. He had heard Cordelia's final cry. For 5 years, he had lived with his own guilt, believing that his love had caused her death. Now, finally, he was free. You should have come forward sooner, Alexander told him after the trial. I was a coward, Thomas admitted, and I am sorry. For what it is worth, she loved you at the end. She told me, in her last letter, she said you were the best man she had ever known. Alexander said nothing. But that night, he went to the East Wing. He stood before Cordelia's portrait for a long time. Then he took it down, wrapped it carefully, and placed it in a trunk in the attic. Not because I want to forget her, he told Eliza, because I want to stop living in her shadow. Eliza took his hand. What do you want to live in instead? Your light, he said, if you will have me. The summer solstice arrived, and with it, a celebration. Thornbridge Manor opened its doors for the first time in 5 years. Neighbours came, friends came, Eliza's sisters came, wide-eyed and delighted, running through the gardens with abandon. Her father came, his health improved, his debts paid, his smile returned. And at the end of the evening, when the guests had gone and the servants had retired, Alexander led Eliza to the folly, not the crumbling one on the cliffs, but a new folly he had built in the gardens, a small stone pavilion draped in roses. I have something to tell you, he said. I know. She smiled up at him, her cheeks flushed with wine and happiness. You have been trying to tell me for 6 months. I love you, Eliza Thornbridge. He said it simply, without drama, without poetry, just the truth, offered like a gift. I swore never to love again. I built walls around my heart. I buried myself in duty and solitude and brandy, and then you arrived asking impertinent questions and firing pistols at blackmailers and refusing to let me drown. I love you too, she said. I think I loved you the moment I saw you standing in that dark study, pretending not to feel anything. You were so clearly feeling everything. You just needed someone to remind you that feeling is not weakness. It is strength. He kissed her. The roses swayed in the summer breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sang. When we first married, he murmured against her lips, I made you a promise. I promised you kindness and civility. I promised to never raise a hand to you. I have kept those promises. Yes, you have. But I want to make a new promise now, a better one. He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. I promise to love you, Eliza, for the rest of my life. Not because I need a duchess, not because I need an heir, but because you are the best part of me, and I am a better man when you are beside me, I will spend every day trying to deserve you." She pulled him to his feet. "You already deserve me, Alexander Thornbridge. You always did. You just had to let yourself believe it." The moon rose over Somerset. The nightingales sang, and in the rose-covered folly, a duke who had sworn never to love again held his duchess in his arms and discovered, at last, that some promises are worth breaking, and some promises are worth keeping forever. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.